What's up, Sanisa, Super Bad Estrada here, and I just want to give a huge special shout out to the relay. Thank you so much for all of the continuous support, and thank you for all of the support during and after and before every single fight.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Joseph Parker and Lucas Browne is in play for August in New Zealand. The event is slated to help the launch of DAZN streaming service in New Zealand. Parker's manager, David Higgins, is working out the details with the boxer's promoter, Eddie Hearn of Matchroom. Higgins was hoping to get Parker's rival, undefeated Junior Fa, but he claims that Fa's asking price for the contest was unrealistic. Lucas Browne is a much bigger name than Fa, Higgins told NewsHub. He's been in a sold-out O2 Arena in London, has a profile in the UK, and he's only had a couple of losses to very good opponents. If a deal is not reached with Browne, NewsHub reveals that another option is undefeated Dempsey McKean, an awkward southpaw from Queensland. Right now, the local government has a restriction on gatherings, limiting them to no more than 100 people. But Higgins is adamant the event will only go ahead if they can guarantee safety as well as financial viability. Now, for Lucas Browne, this is definitely a change in plans, as Lucas was supposed to be fighting back in March against undefeated up-and-comer Abdi Daftaev. COVID-19 pandemic canceled all of those plans, so now it's supposed to be Joseph Parker. Comparatively, it's the best choice for a guy like Lucas Browne, guy who's got 1 or 2 losses. He's getting up there in age. You want to be a part of fights that are going to get you some scratch. And a Parker fight will get you more attention, more scratch, than a fight with Daftaev. I will say, I didn't have Lucas Browne winning that Daftaev fight. I felt Abdi, he was going to hurt Lucas. Maybe Joseph Parker will too, but with Joseph Parker, especially down there in New Zealand, in that part of the world, perhaps he can make a little bit more money while he's getting hurt. After all, this is intended to muster up some interest for DAZN's launch into that region of the world in New Zealand, gathering some familiar faces in that part of the world. Joseph Parker, Lucas Browne. They're familiar. Perhaps they can help you sell more tickets, garner more interest for the people at home than an Abdi Daftaev would, For Lucas Browne, this does make a lot of sense. Comes to Joseph Parker,
mixed feelings.
Perhaps this fight makes sense in a regional kind of way, in a fiscal sense, to where, okay, this is intended to muster up interest down there in New Zealand, so you need familiar faces to do it. You couldn't get Junior Fa in the ring. We talked about it in a previous video. I'll leave the link to that video in the description box. This fight with Browne, it could be a banana peel. It could be a banana peel in the sense that, okay, Lucas Browne, he's older than the last 2 guys that you fought. And the last 2 guys that you fought,
With 39.
the both of them were 39 years old. All right. Alex Lapai, Shondell Winters, Lucas Browne. He's older than those guys. He's 41 years old. And I could forgive the guy being 41 years old if he was still competing at the highest levels of the sport. But you tell me, yeah, the guy's 41 years old, but he's still ranked as a top 10 fighter, top 5 fighter, something like that, here today. And that's not the case.
Nope.
The case is, Lucas Browne, not only did he get stopped by Dillian White some years ago,
Yeah.
but this guy very recently got stopped by the likes of Dave Allen.
Did you forget?
Dave Allen's not a world-level guy. He's not a world-level fighter. That's where Lucas Browne is at. Got stopped by a body shot. Dispatched in 3 rounds. What were 3 rounds? In a fight with Dave Allen. Dave Allen, I got nothing against him. God bless him and his family. But Dave's not a world-level guy. He's not. That's where Lucas Browne is in his career. He's getting stopped by a domestic-level guy from the UK in 3 rounds. Essentially, what I'm communicating is, this is yet another tune-up fight for Joseph Parker. That's what it is.
Another one.
Oh yeah, his dance partner's a little bit more familiar than the last 2, but better still, it is that kind of fight.
It's a tune-up fight.
Another one. Those of you that follow this channel will already know that myself, I've been waiting for Joseph Parker to pick up the pace, fight someone with a pulse, someone interesting, someone who brings some kind of intrigue to the match, and that ain't Lucas Browne. I'm sorry, but it's not. It's another tune-up fight. Maybe asking yourself, well, if you think it's a tune-up fight, and if that's what it is, then what makes it a banana peel? Well, Lucas Browne is a guy who got stopped in 3 rounds against a domestic-level guy in Dave Allen. The bar of standards, the expectation for a former champion in Joseph Parker, is a bit higher than that. You don't want to be the guy that's going 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds with Lucas Browne, not when that same Lucas Browne just got stopped in 3 by Dave Allen. Joseph Parker,
He's a nice kid.
he's not known for having a mean streak. He's trying to get one. He's working on being more aggressive, being a more busy fighter, going out there and closing the show. And if he's working on this, the fact that he is, that indicates that Joseph Parker is really on the more polite end of the spectrum as far as today's heavyweights go. That opens a door to where it might take Parker a couple more rounds than it took Dave Allen to finish Lucas Browne. That's what makes it a banana peel. You don't get this guy out of there, get him out of there quick, it's going to reflect poorly on you. I know it seems like people are always in a rush to criticize someone. They're always very critical of what someone else is doing, and I understand where that sentiment comes from. But if the boxing community at large watches Joseph Parker go in there with Lucas Browne, and it's taken longer than it should to finish the guy where it only took Dave Allen 3 rounds, well, that's gonna leave a lasting impression, won't it? People are gonna think what they're gonna think. When the boxing community at large saw Gervonta Davis go all of 12 rounds with Yuriorkis Gamboa, a very shot, over-the-hill, injured Yuriorkis Gamboa, when they saw him go 12 rounds with that guy where he's supposed to be a young fighter in his prime, it left a lasting impression.
And not a good one.
It means what it means. The same applies here to Joseph Parker.
That's what makes it a banana peel.
He's expected to perform. You want to be in the mix of the big conversations with the other big names that are out there, you've got to perform.
You have to.
At minimum, you're expected to do just as good as the likes of a Dave Allen. Dave Allen's never been a world champion. You have. So if you're gonna go in there with a guy that Dave Allen stopped in 3 rounds, yeah, you're expected to do better. If you're gonna have another tune-up fight, your 3rd consecutive, what is your 3rd consecutive tune-up fight? You're expected to treat the guy like a tune-up kind of guy. We'll see if Parker does. Look for this in August. In other news, Top Rank President had this to say. He says, for Fury versus Joshua, the ideal location is America, not the UK. He points to the February rematch between Fury and Wilder, which generated a $17 million gate at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The easiest scenario for all of us to get to is let Joshua, hopefully, if he can get past Pulev, who is going to be a tough mandatory fight for him, and let's have Tyson get in the ring back with Wilder, and then sets up the semifinals for the finals, said to both to Sky Sports. For the big Super Bowl, the big UEFA championship match between Joshua and Fury, that for me is the cleanest way and probably the easiest way, where everybody lives up to their commitments. That would be obviously the preference in order of bouts in the most simple way. I think that the success of the biggest events in the history of combat sports, have originated from America. I keep going back to that. I think the impact and the success of a pay-per-view being distributed from the United States to the late hours or early hours, let's call it in the UK, we've seen that be very successful, and the fans are connected and will stay up. My heart of hearts tells me that would be the ideal place. But obviously, we would be open to any site and any prospective dynamic that would be different. To do a fight in the UK would be fantastic. Both guys are larger than life, and to sync that up with the United States, but as we just said, if it was the old world, we just did under 17 million with Fury and Wilder, and I'm not sure there was a gate in the UK that's done that. I think we'd have to weigh all the different circumstances, and if it was outside locations like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Asia, whatever, we would obviously weigh those too. Look, let me tell you something.
What?
If we're going to idealize the situation, if we're going to talk about what is ideal, the ideal location for a heavyweight undisputed title fight between 2 Brits, 2 guys from the UK, if we're going to talk about what is ideal, ideally, it would be in the UK. These are 2 UK fighters whose fan bases originate in the UK. They themselves originate from the UK. So what ideal place, what place would be more ideal than for the fight to happen in the UK?
Huh?
You talk about the finance of it. The Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder rematch earlier this year, it did very good at the gate, and that's all well and good.
Congratulations.
But you don't think that Joshua versus Fury could do the same as, if not better than that, in the United Kingdom? Because I happen to think it would. I happen to think it could. Let me tell you something, you're not going to get the reaction for that fight between those 2 particular fighters here in America that you would over there in the United Kingdom. It stands to reason. It is simply a matter of fact.
So let's just cut the crap.
To the boxing fans over there in the United Kingdom, that's a historic fight. That is a historic event. Thus, it's going to mean more to them over there in the UK than it will to the people here in the US. And granted that many of those fans over there in the United Kingdom are willing to travel to wherever that fight lands, if we're going to go as far as idealizing things, the ideal location for a match. If we're going to go as far as doing that, those fans in the UK, they shouldn't have to travel.
Shouldn't have to.
That's their fight. Those are their fighters. And you can cite as many historical precedences of big fights that have happened here in America as you want to. You can do that till you're blue in the face.
Go ahead.
This is not America's fight.
It's their fight.
You know the only reason that the people over there at Toprank, Todd do both, those guys, you know the only reason they want that fight to land here is so they can charge you an arm and a leg to see it. You know that, right?
Right.
You know that the only reason they feel that the ideal location for that fight is here in America is because over there in the United Kingdom, they won't have as much control over it. That's what it boils down to. That's what it is. They want to be able to charge the American boxing community
To see it.
the going rate for a pay-per-view when it comes to that fight. Whereas if the fight is over there in the United Kingdom, in all likelihood, you'd see it as a part of your DAZN subscription.
Or ESPN.
Because I hardly think the people over there at Top Rank and ESPN would try to stage it as a pay-per-view to the American fans at around, 5 or 6 in the afternoon? I don't think so. And that's why they want it here, in this country, in this time zone, so that they can maximize profits for themselves. Now, very recently, Bob Arum, he was quoted as saying that $80 pay-per-views, that price point, it's got to go. What they need to do is go back to charging $40 for a pay-per-view, and as a result of that, you'll see more buys. And there may be truth to that. There may be. But for this particular fight, I don't think they charge the boxing community $40 fucking for that fight.
No way. Nah.
And if they did, well then it would defeat the purpose of staging it here in America.
What do you mean?
I'll tell you what I mean. The only virtue of staging that fight here in America is that you can charge people more to see it. That's the virtue of it, that the price point here is a much bigger price point than the price point over there in the United Kingdom.
That's it.
That would be the virtue. But if you're not going to charge people $80 to see it, if you're going to charge people something like $40 to see it, there's that much more reason for you to just let the fight happen in the UK, because those are comparable prices to the UK's price point for a pay-per-view.
You get me?
I'd sooner believe that that fight gets you more buys in the UK at a going rate of either $25 or $30 per pay-per-view than it would in the US at a going rate of $40 for a pay-per-view. If the price points are going to be comparable price points that are in the same neighborhood, I think that fight still gets you more pay-per-view buys in the United Kingdom than the United States.
That's if they were going to charge $40 for it.
Which I don't think they would. Not for this fight. Not for this particular engagement. I don't think for a second Top Rank would give this fight to me and you for just $40. No.
Nah.
Maybe some other fights with some other fighters, but not this one. I think they'd charge me and you $80 to see this thing from home. And the way that breaks down, if they charged you $80 here in the States to see this fight, that fight isn't going to get the same reaction that it would in the United Kingdom. One, because the boxing fans here, they're not as invested in it as the Brits are. Two, people in America, they don't want to pay $80 to see a fight anyway. Most of them. That's the truth. That particular price point is more of a deterrent than an attraction. $80 for a pay-per-view. Now, if you were to try to stage it as a $40 pay-per-view, okay, maybe you get a little bit more buys, certainly more than you would have got if it were an $80 pay-per-view, but at $40 a pay-per-view at that particular price point, well, that's comparable to what they would have charged in the UK for it, so you might as well have left it over there. This idea that the American market is the ideal market for most every single engagement, every single big fight, is an antiquated idea based on antiquated eras of boxing. This ain't the early 2000s, this ain't the early 90s, the early 80s, or the early 70s, okay? This is not your father's era of boxing. Boxing is more a world sport now than it has ever been. You hear Todd Duboff talking about the gate for Wilder versus Fury 2, and it was a big gate. It was successful. Close to $17 million. That's pretty fucking good. But you'll excuse me for saying so that I think that Joshua versus Fury in the UK could do the same as, if not better, than that.
Sure, why not?
At a venue that can house more boxing fans than any venue here in the States. Let me tell you something. If Todd Duboff and the people at Top Rank are pushing this narrative, pushing this agenda that that fight should happen here instead of there, it really is for their own benefit. It's not for the benefit of the boxers or the boxing fans.
It's not.
Gotta call a spade a spade. They want it here in the States because they figure
It's better for us.
we have a better chance of being in control of things, or have more control over some things here in America than we would if the fight were over there in the UK. Over there in the UK, you know, it really would be a matchroom Sky Sports
Kind of situation.
It might be. Over there in the UK, Anthony Joshua would be the A-side to Tyson Fury. He would be. He's got the bigger fan base. He is the bigger draw. That is proven over time. Whereas here in America, you know, Tyson Fury,
Last fight.
that last pay-per-view, kind of broke through with it. Kind of did, yeah. You could argue that, at minimum, Tyson Fury has been on pay-per-view 2 more times than Anthony Joshua ever has. I'm not sure that that would make him the A-side here in the United States, but I do think that would give him a little bit more leverage than what he would have in the UK. So if we're going to talk about who's the A-side in the United States, that really boils down to who's willing to put up more money for the fight, DAZN or ESPN. That's a separate conversation entirely. But that is what would determine, regardless of what venue, what location we're talking about, who's got the power and who's got the leverage. That's what would determine who the A-side actually is. We know that Anthony Joshua has sold far more pay-per-views, far more tickets to a fight in the United Kingdom than Tyson Fury ever has.
That's true.
And even though Tyson Fury here in America has been on pay-per-view 2 more times than Anthony Joshua ever has, even here in America, A-side status would boil down to who's willing to put up the most money, DAZN or ESPN, in spite of Tyson Fury having been on pay-per-view 2 more times than Anthony Joshua ever has. At minimum, the hierarchy of thought for Top Rank has to be that here in the States, our guy Tyson, he's got a little bit more leverage. He might have a little bit more leverage than he would over there in the UK, so we want it over here. We benefit the most from the fight happening over here as opposed to over there. And that's why we're seeing this illogical, self-serving push. I mean, it is a very sordid affair. Over there, it's about Sky Sports and BT Sport, and over here, it's about DAZN and ESPN. It's very sordid. It's going to be an interesting set of negotiations if and when they begin.